Hey y'all, back again with plant sessions. I hope you are all well, your plants are happy and healthy. Today we're going to talk about watering arid plants, so cacti and succulents. Watering, you might be saying like, hey Kristen, watering is really easy. I just water them and that's it. And yes, however, the thing is that if watering were so easy, I don't think it would be the number one killer of indoor plants. So I'm going to share my number one secret of how to not overwater your plants, and that is to underwater your plants. No, in all seriousness, we're gonna cover some of my tried and true methods of growing healthy and happy succulents and cacti indoors and not overwatering, because they're so easily overwatered, especially indoors. So let's just dive right in. So the first thing that we've got to cover with succulents and cacti, and the way to not overwater and to properly water, is you have to give them the correct environment. So succulents, cacti, arid plants, they grow in arid environments. So drought, sun, heat, desert. Think scalding sun, you're parched, you're like dying for water. That's what a cactus loves. So if your apartment is dark and it's cool and it never really gets a lot of direct sun, then no matter what you do in terms of keeping cacti or arid plants indoors, you probably will always overwater, because when you think about watering, it's really about the rate. You need to find the balance between the water and the sun. So if your plant is not receiving the sun that it needs, it's not working. Like sun makes a plant work. It's like exercise. It's like on the treadmill, and it needs water after it's perspired, after it's worked out. And so if it's not getting any sun, but you're watering on a frequent basis, even just once a month, but it's not getting the sun that it needs, then that water is useless. It's useless. And basically it's just gonna sit at the bottom of that pot. The roots are not gonna be activated because they're not working out, because they don't need any food. They're just resting. So once you understand that, fact of the matter of that balance, it's gonna be a lot easier to keep your plants alive. So first and foremost, you've got to match the plant's original native environment and create that environment indoors for that plant. And I promise you, when you do that, success will occur. So that is like number one, plant 101. We'll leave that aside, but it's really important to understand as we go into just actual watering. So when we're talking about succulents, let's say for example our beautiful jade, our Crassula ovata. Now, most succulents are super drought tolerant. So when I say that one of my main secrets is underwatering, yes, I basically starve these guys until it's absolutely time to water. After I underwater, one of my tried and true methods is the weight test. And if you ever come into Tula and you talk to any one of us when you're buying plants or talking about plants, we always talk about the weight test. So light, airy versus heavy and weighty. This is one of the best methods that I've ever used, especially for new plant owners. When it's time to water, especially a succulent, if you don't know, if you're like, I don't know if I should water, doing that weight test and picking it up, does it feel really airy, really light? Is the soil hardened? Has it contracted from the sides? If all those things point to yes, then it's a safe bet to water. If your plant still feels weighty and heavy, the soil at the top is still moist, it's darker in color, it's not time to water. The roots still have plenty of moisture to feed and use. You really don't need to water yet. So let me show you what I mean. So this is a jade. It is so dry, it just comes right out of the pot. Now, I'm gonna get close. You see how dry this soil is? It is light colored, it's hardened, it's almost like kind of spongy, And if I put it back into its grow pot, you see that the sides have contracted from the grow pot. All signs of a very dry Crassula. Now, it doesn't look sad. It looks very happy and beautiful. It actually almost looks the same as the one that's been watered. So confusing, yes, but also the reason that you know that succulents are made for drought, so you can let them get to this point and they'll be just fine. Here is a jade that has just been watered. You see how much darker that soil is, and it's not as crusty, right? It's still wet. It's harder for me to take it out of the pot. I can't just grab it. I just squeeze it a little bit. And you see how much darker that is? You see it's definitely more moist. This has just been watered a few days ago. It does not need to be watered yet. So when you water a really dry plant like this, I'm gonna use this bowl because we're gonna water. You wanna take it to the sink. You wanna give it a good thorough water. We're asked a lot at Tula, how often should I water? How much should I water? And those things are so dependent on your environment, what you did before, what you do after. So it's always really gonna depend on the sort of environment that you have at home. But I would always suggest bringing your plants to the sink as long as they have drainage, as long as you have the right environment, and when they're dry, shower them. Like a huge rainfall just passing through the desert. Big thunder, lightning, rainfall. That's what this plant wants right now. So now, when we're gonna water this, the water is gonna pass right through. You see, it's already happening right into the pot. It's because this plant is so dry, water's just passing right through the soil. That's what you want with succulent and cacti. Now I'm starting to feel this plant getting heavier because water is saturating the soil. You see it just passing through? I'm gonna put some on top. Oh yeah, nice shower, it's so nice. Oh, that feels so good. I'm still draining out. That's what we call a thorough water. Whenever you read that, what the hell does thorough water mean? That is a thorough water. Thoroughly watering so that water drains from the bottom of the pot, and you actually repeat. So it's like rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Because if you just did that once, it's not enough. Like we saw how dry this root ball is. One pass is really not going to saturate the soil the way that it really needs to in order to kind of come back from that drought. If you were just to do one pass, you could do that also, but I promise you that you'll be watering again in a day or two because it's gonna evaporate pretty quickly. If we water thoroughly the way that we just did, we can leave this guy to the side and water again, maybe in a week or two, depending again on your environment. So you can also leave it in the sink a little bit and let it absorb water from the bottom if maybe you're gonna travel for a while. It's, the height of the summer and it's super, super hot and you don't wanna have to water really often. So that is a thorough water. Let's do this again. I love watering really, really dry succulents. It is like the most satisfying thing. So here's another little baby that's really dry and I wanna show you that soil. See how it's contracted from the side? It's hard. The soil is hard. I would have to break it apart. It's not gonna fall apart on me. And it's light in color. I'm gonna pull it out. No, I'm not. It's not gonna let me pull it out. Never mind. But wait, maybe it will. Let me see. No, the roots have attached to the inside. But you see what I'm saying. Now, we're going to do another thorough water. Let's get close. And the water, see, the soil is so dry that the water pools at the top. So with really, really dry plants like this, now it's starting to drip. You don't want to just pour a ton of water in right away. You want to just pour a little bit and now watch it absorb. And actually there's little bubbles popping, air bubbles. When there's air bubbles popping up at the surface, it's a great sign. That means there's oxygen in your soil. which is really, really good. That's what your roots need. They need oxygen. You can't see the bubbles popping. It's really sweet. Pop, pop, pop. It's like Rice Krispies. You can hear it too. That's a great sign. So that's also what you want to look for when you're watering a really dry plant. You want to look for those bubbles popping up at the top, or even listening to it, like Rice Krispie cereal. All right, one more time. This is a nice thorough water. I see more bubbles, so that means that this soil actually needed what I just gave it, more water, because there's still oxygen in there. There's still air pockets that the water is now filling. And it's still pooling at the top, so it's really taking a long time for the water to actually saturate the soil. It's so dry, it's so compact, because that can happen too. But as you can see, this guy looks beautiful, doesn't look distressed in any way. That's the confusing part of succulents. They look absolutely gorgeous, they're totally fine until, and you don't know whether or not you should water. So this guy's still draining. We're just gonna let it drain. I'm just gonna sit it down into this bucket. One sign that you can look for, here are two things, two last little tips. When your foliage starts to wrinkle, see how this is wrinkling? It's so dehydrated. Now you can obviously let a succulent get to that point because they can always bounce back, but it's probably better for the root system, well, I know it's better for the root system to not get it to this point, because if you let your plant dehydrate to the point that the foliage is raisening, then the root system is actually dying because it needs to conserve. So the root system is getting smaller. So if we were to soak this plant and continue soaking it, its root system has gotten to the point where it's small. So it's not able to take up as much water. So now we have to be careful in how much water that we introduce to this particular plant because of the fact that it's so dehydrated. I hope that makes sense. But here, this is a sign that you can always tell, oh yeah, this plant needs water. Dehydrated, wrinkly leaves. Another sign, this aloe. I bet you guys have a lot of aloe at home. Aloe is great, medicinal plant, good for those burns. So see at the tips here, it's browning at the tip and it's kind of like curling in. See how this guy's really dry, curling in? This is a really dry aloe. This guy needs more consistent, more frequent, thorough watering. And we can bring this guy back to life. It'll plump right up. We'll get rid of those. We'll clip off these brown tips because those don't come back after you begin watering. And the new leaves will be nice and plump and succulent. So this is a tutorial of how to water succulent plants. My ending notes are this. 1, if you wonder if you should water or not water and your plant does not look super wrinkled or dry tips, then just don't water. Do your succulent the favor. It will live just fine, with a few more days of not watering. Wait until, it really feels light and airy, that the soil has started to harden, maybe even contract from the sides. Now this only applies to arid plants, those that are accustomed to drought. We'll talk about tropicals in another session. My second piece of advice, well actually I just said it all in that one thing. So underwater, do the weight test. Wait until you see dry, contracting soil from the sides. Or if you want to wait until you see wrinkled or dried tips. Better be safe than sorry. You can always it's much easier, I shouldn't say always, it's much easier to bring a plant back from underwatering than overwatering. If you overwater a plant, you rot it from the core. It's really hard to bring it back. You have to propagate it, and that's a whole thing. So I hope this was helpful. As always, reach out to us, care@tula.house if you have any questions. I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning. I'm Kristen. I'm one of the co-founders of Tula. I really appreciate you tuning in and wish you a wonderful day and your plants too. Okay, bye-bye.